Hunting for Answers is a production of the Black Effect Podcast Network and iHeartRadio. Welcome to Hunting for Answers, a true crime podcast. I'm your host, Hunter, and today we're highlighting a case that started back in December 1987 in Chicago, Illinois. A 71-year-old woman walked out of her home one winter day and never returned. 4 months later, human remains were discovered along the shores of Lake Michigan, near New Buffalo, Michigan, just across the state line. For 37 years, the woman found their remain unidentified, buried as a Jane Doe. Her family searched for answers, never knowing she lay in an unmarked grave just miles away. In 2025, that all would change when DNA technology finally gave her back her name. This is the story of Dorothy Glanton. Dorothy Glanton was 71 years old when she vanished from her Chicago home on December 9, 1987. She had spent most of her life in the city, surrounded by a large and loving extended family who knew her as steady, present, and deeply rooted in their lives. Dorothy was originally from Alabama, and like many Black families seeking safety and opportunity during the Great Migration, her family eventually made their way north to Chicago. It was there that Dorothy built her world, and it was the place that she always called home. December 9th, 1987. Dorothy walked out of her Chicago home and was never seen again. The details of that day are still unknown. No one knows where she planned to go. No one knows why she left. And no one could have imagined that this would be the last time her family would see her alive. 4 months had passed. Her family was frantic, searching, calling, waiting for any sign of her. Her elderly mother, especially, was heartbroken. On April 8, 1988, along the lake shore near New Buffalo, Michigan, authorities recovered human remains. The body was severely decomposed, with no identification and no personal belongings. Nothing that could tell investigators who this woman was. The initial forensic assessment concluded that the victim was a white woman, either in her 40s or 50s. This, which we know now, was a serious and costly error. The woman found along the lakeshore was not white, and she wasn't middle-aged. But in 1988, misidentifications like this were not uncommon, especially when examiners were working with severely decomposed remains and forensic science still was limited at this time. With no way to determine who she was, the remains became known simply as the New Buffalo Jane Doe. And from there, the trail went cold. Back in Chicago, Dorothy's family was living a nightmare. Months had passed with no news, no sightings, no leads, nothing to guide them. In August 1988, 4 months after the remains had been found in Michigan, a relative placed a newspaper ad on behalf of Dorothy's mother, a public plea for her daughter to come home. The message spoke to her mother's fear and her desperate hope that Dorothy was still alive. But by then, Dorothy had already been found, her remains recovered, yet still unknown and unidentified. The case went cold. Years turned into decades. Her family never stopped wondering what happened. Their questions became part of their daily lives. Where did she go that day? Why did she leave? Was she searching for something or trying to get away from something? And was she still out there somewhere? With no answers and no trace of her fate, they lived in a constant and painful state of not knowing. Fast forward to 2023. the Michigan State Police decided to reopen the case of the new Buffalo Jane Doe. This time, they had a powerful new tool at their disposal: investigative genetic genealogy. They partnered with the DNA Doe Project, a nonprofit organization dedicated to identifying unknown remains through DNA and family tree analysis. And with that partnership in place, the work began immediately. Dorothy's remains were exhumed decades later so that DNA samples could be collected and analyzed. The samples were obtained at Western Michigan University's Homer Stryker MD School of Medicine. Astria Forensics performed the extraction, Hudson Alpha Discovery handled the sequencing, and a bioinformatics analyst processed the data. Once the profile was uploaded into 2 DNA databases, the long process of reconstructing a family tree began. In the summer of 2023, volunteers from the DNA Doe Project gathered at a genealogy retreat to focus on this case. The team was led by a genealogist named Lisa Needler, an experienced researcher who had worked on dozens of cold case identifications. But the mis-ID from 1988 created a major challenge. Initially, they thought they were searching for someone much younger, possibly even a descendant of an older woman who appeared in the matches. But as they worked through the genetic clues, the pieces didn't quite line up. Something was off. The genealogist soon ran into a challenge shaped by a familiar reality: the difficulty tracing the family history of a Black woman during this era. Sometimes there were gaps, history that was never written down, or things that were left out of records. But even with those missing pieces, the DNA Doe Project kept going. They followed every clue they could find. Slowly, the piece began to come into focus. The genetic clues showed that the woman was African American, not white, and that she was a senior woman, not someone in her 40s or 50s. Once the misinformation from 1988 was set aside, the family tree began pointing toward a single name: Dorothy Glanton. Originally from Alabama, a woman who had spent most of her life in Chicago, a woman who had disappeared in December 1987. After 37 years, she had finally been found. On November 12, 2025, the Michigan State Police announced the news. The new Buffalo Jane Doe had been identified as Dorothy Glanton. Detective Sergeant John Moore, the lead investigator, said this identification brings closure to a family that has wondered for nearly 4 decades what happened to their loved one. Her family was notified, and for the first time in 37 years, they could gather and honor her memory, finally knowing where she had been all this time. Even with her identity confirmed, many questions remain. Why did Dorothy leave her home that day? How did she end up 60 miles away in Michigan? Did she travel there on her own, or did someone take her? And what happened in those final moments before she reached the water? The cause of death could not be determined, and with no signs of foul play, investigators cannot say whether her death was accidental or intentional. These are the questions that are still left unanswered. Our thoughts and prayers are with the family and friends of Dorothy Glanton. After nearly 4 decades of uncertainty, they finally know what happened to her. The circumstances, however, are still a mystery. Anyone with information about the circumstances surrounding Dorothy Glanton's disappearance or her death should contact Detective Sergeant John Moore at the Michigan State Police Niles Post. You can find their contact information in the description below. As we close out this episode, remember that sharing Dorothy's story helps keep her case visible and may help bring new answers. Follow Hunting for Answers for updates on this case and others like it. Subscribe on YouTube and follow us on Instagram and TikTok for more true crime stories and case updates. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode. Until next time. Hunting for Answers is a production of the Black Effect Podcast Network. For more podcasts from the Black Effect Podcast Network, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.